we go, John, I've said it. Another weekend of footy, another points haul for the Premier League leaders who, quite frankly, made light work of that visiting Tottenham side. Now, we often refer to them on the show as the juggernaut, that is Manchester City, and as they steamrolled their way to a 16th straight win, we're wondering if City are a team that will continue to dominate the league for years to come. Let us know your thoughts on that, and also up for discussion, having found the back of the net once again, we'll be taking a closer look at Romelu Lukaku and asking why all the criticism, or as John put it in his poll on Twitter, why does he attract savage criticism? Is it totally unfair, entirely justified, or somewhere in between? Jump onto John's Twitter feed at John Dykes FC to have your say. Plus, it is Monday, so let us know how your team got on over the weekend. Do keep in touch on all of that good stuff right here on Facebook Live.
Thank you very much, Michelle. OK, let's start then with City's predictable victory over Spurs. I have to say predictable because having tried very hard on Friday's show to argue that Spurs were the club best equipped to hand City a defeat, we eventually all came to the conclusion that Pep Guardiola's side would win that game easily, and they duly did so. So let's have a look at the table, where in the process of maintaining their 11-point lead over United and also opening up a remarkable 21-point advantage over Spurs, that's what City did. United kept pace, of course, by beating West Brom and re-establishing their 3-point cushion over Chelsea. Liverpool moved back into the top 4 by crushing Bournemouth. In truth, though, we're increasingly going to look at the top of the table and find ourselves focusing on the race for the Champions League rather than the title. But that does not mean we ignore City. How can you? What they're doing is almost getting silly right now. Take that win over Spurs, the team that ended the winning run last season. Yeah, that's Spurs. And consider this. City were dominant. They had 11 shots on target, Spurs 2. Spurs' first shot on target came in the 55th minute. And City did it without David Silva, who's earned 13 goal involvements this season already. City missed a penalty. Kane and Ali, remember, could have been red-carded as well. But before Spurs fans pipe up, yeah, I do think Otamendi was also lucky to get away with his dangerous high challenge on Kane. But my broader point here is that the game as a whole was actually staggeringly one-sided. Simply put, City have got so many ways of scoring against any team. Aguero and Jesus aside, they have an incredible amount of goal scoring and creating options. Look at this lot. Raheem Sterling missed a couple of sitters, but he's still got 15 goals in all competitions. Also, he scores late. 7 of Sterling's 11 Premier League goals have come in the 80th minute or later. Leroy Sané, he's been involved in 11 goals in 8 league home games. Kevin De Bruyne, involved in 14 goals now in 15 league appearances since the start of September. The top 3 Premier League assisters, by the way, are now De Bruyne, Sané and Silva, all with 8. So what next? Well, there it is, Champagne Supernova. They've set a new Premier League record for consecutive victories, 16, as Michelle mentioned earlier on. Next in their sights, I guess, 3 more to match Pep's own record in terms of big European League football with Bayern Munich. You see, the longer this goes on, the more you're going to see projected points and goals tallies dominating the story. What else do you talk about? So how special is all this? Well, someone who's well placed to answer that is a former City striker himself, as well as a star for Liverpool and Spurs. He's been a Premier League commentator and pundit for many a year now, and he's seen the best of the best this league has had to offer. So, as Paul Walsh joins me from his home in England, Walshy, good to have you with us. Are City...
Hi, John.
Hi, are City right up there with the very best we've seen?
Well, I mean, for me, they're probably getting close as you can get to that fantastic Barcelona team that wiped the floor with the whole of Europe. You know, I think they're frighteningly good. Got so many options. You know, and if you're trying to pick holes in them, you could argue at times with their risk taking and sometimes their defensive setup sometimes doesn't, you know, give someone a chance, but no one goes there apart from teams outside the top 6. No one tries to play them anyway, in any type of game.
What we've only ever seen before was a couple of teams, maybe an Arsenal team or two, that sort of basically, we won't worry about the defending too much because we're going to be on you so much. But I've never seen anyone do it as irresistibly as this, Paul, have you?
No, that's what I'm saying. So when teams come there, they sit narrow and deep because they're frightened to death of the great football, the intricate passing. Players can have the ball tight. They move the ball so quickly together. And they're on the same wavelength, and when that marries itself up together, you've got, you know, frightening passing at pace, and that's what undoes teams. And I've not seen any side do that since that Barcelona team I was just talking about.
So what we're really talking about is it only ends when City have a really off day, right?
Yeah, which isn't that often. But yeah, you're right. Sometimes they don't quite move the ball as quickly as they can, or it doesn't quite all come off. But in most games, they found a way to get over the line. Yeah. And that also tells you a lot about their mentality and their character as individuals. That, you know, they can't always win playing fantastic football. Sometimes they're going to have to grind the result out, and they've still got that. Yeah. You know, let's not confuse inner strength and mentality with you know, their ability. They have both, and that's scary in itself.
Right, so take a breather for a minute, because I'm going to ask this: where does it end? Like, most immediately, of course, we talk about their run of fixtures. So let's have a look at this. Manchester City's next 5, and we say to ourselves, what have they got to worry about in there? Well, Crystal Palace have found some form lately. They might pose a challenge to that possible 19-game winning run, but it does look as if their trip to Liverpool might just offer the next realistic prospect of a defeat. If you look longer term now, and the newspapers have been doing that, maybe we should be looking at this. Today's back pages are dominated by stories suggesting that City's owners want Guardiola to reverse his original plan to leave the club in 2019 and instead to stay for a decade, building an era of dominance similar to that enjoyed by Sir Alex Ferguson at United, and also before that Liverpool. Paul, this has got a number of clubs and fans running scared, most notably Manchester United, I'd imagine. I've been reading people saying they're going to dominate. Can you see that happening?
Without a doubt. I mean, he's created something here that, you know, everyone was last year. What a difference 6-8 months makes in football. Criticising his philosophy and how he was going to do things, and how the risks taking didn't always pay off and wasn't quite working. And this season, all of it's worked fantastically well. And you know, he's created this monster of a team that has so much ability and options. You know, if he were to sign a new contract, and I can't see where else Pep would want to go after grinding out the tough times at well, if you can call them tough times at Man City, creating the situation he's got to be where he is. Yeah, I know it's worth a chuckle, that one, was it, the tough times? But yeah, but it's listen, you'd want it to continue now, and the scary bit for Man City and the board would be if he looked to go somewhere else, wouldn't it?
Yeah, well, Paul, take another breather right now. I'm going to talk about Manchester United a little bit later on with you, but we'll come back to you in just a moment. You know, Michelle, it's a shame it looks as if Paul's rubbed a bit of Vaseline on the lens there, but it's great talking to him, and he'll be back with a bit more very shortly. What are the viewers saying about City?
Yeah, a couple of differing opinions. Take this one first from Noriko, who says Man City is unbeatable. They'll be unbeaten. City looks like the Barcelona of the Premier League, and Guardiola's so good, and then he has that special relationship with the players. But then you look at Amiobi's comment that says Man City can't play with the same intensity all season. They'll start to prioritise either Champions League or the Premier League as it goes on. They can't be invincible.
No, I think the lovely thing about this debate is we're talking about superlatives, really, because they're not really Barcelona, are they? They don't play football like Barcelona. There are elements of that. They play maybe a little bit more like Bayern, perhaps, but there's an oomph to City as well. And the beautiful thing about that is they will be challenged. Can they repeat it in different contexts? And if that is the case, we're already seeing, as Paul's alluded to, they've dug deep a few times in one match. I think it's fascinating to see what they've still got to offer. That's what's scary for the opposition, really.
Something a little bit scary for City, actually, is David Silva. Hamza's asking if you've got any updates on the situation.
No. I mean, you know, obviously, if anyone didn't know, obviously, David Silva, who we all put into our fantasy team, he was the most transferred-in player, couldn't play, and they cited personal reasons. The fact of the matter is that things happen. And if there's nothing official forthcoming, there's no point in speculating. In fact, it's actually really harmful to speculate, whether it's on social media or wherever. Suffice to say that these things do happen in life, in football, in all sorts of circumstances, and let's just hope that whatever it is that's affected him, he's fine, and he'll be back doing what he does very well very soon. We'll be back doing what we do, hopefully very well very soon, as we talk about the enigma that is Romelu Lukaku.
As far as putting goals to bed goes, Romelu Lukaku has some fairly decent numbers under his belt, which we'll discuss when we come back. But why do you think he's one of the most divisive players in the Premier League right now? Is he overrated or just over-criticised? Get in touch. We'll see you in a mo.
Thanks for joining me. It's time for a rant. Now, this weekend, Romelu Lukaku scored for Manchester United for the second straight league game. His strike at West Bromwich Albion was actually his 10th of this Premier League campaign and his 95th in his Premier League career. You know, as I watched his rather odd non-celebration, I was reminded of the following comments that I've read recently in the mailbox section of the Football 365 website in recent weeks. Just have a look at some of these. Somebody wrote, for instance, one can never criticise Lukaku for lack of effort, lack of quality. Oh yes. Or how about this one? He displays a complete lack of composure. Or he looks so woefully out of his depth at the top level of the game. Or even worse, his technique is frankly abysmal. The worst I've seen in a United shirt since Obertan. And how about this last one? Romelu Lukaku is just not very good at football. All of those comments came from football fans, and not all of them Manchester United fans, armed with words, keyboards and anger, I'd imagine. Most of them written after the Manchester Derby defeat. Now, consider the following goal stats already posted by a player who's still only 24 years old. Right, let's get into these. He's 28th on the list of all-time Premier League goal scorers. He's scored as many league goals already as Yakubu, just 2 fewer than Emmanuel Adebayor. Lukaku's only 9 goals now behind Chelsea legend Didier Drogba and 14 behind United and Premier League legend Ryan Giggs. He's one of only 5 players to score 50 Premier League goals before his 23rd birthday. He's earned 50 caps for Belgium, and he's already their record goal scorer with 31 in that time. So, what's going on here? Why on earth do we keep reading headlines and articles like this one from the Mirror? Why can't Rom do this week after week? A play there on his bullying ways. We've grown used to this apparent contradiction when it comes to Lukaku. I've heard plenty of pundits express reservations about him, almost in the way they might have done when Drogba first came on the scene in the Premier League and looked a little bit raw in terms of his first touch. Now, I obviously respect the opinions of all the guys I've worked with at the Premier League channel, for instance, Don Hutchison, Andy Townsend, who've played the game at the top level. But they always gave me the impression that I felt that there was criticism of his Lukaku's touch, his hold-up play. I found it a little bit off the mark. It's a bit like saying, if you ask me, that you don't think Riyad Mahrez is all that special because you can't tackle or track back. I've actually seen Lukaku do things that very few players currently playing up top for Premier League clubs can do. So let's get Paul Walsh back in here. I mean, this is a guy who played as a striker, Paul, at the very top level. So from one striker to another, just tell me this. What kind of a striker, what kind of a footballer is Lukaku? And if he's not very good, how's he achieved so much?
Well, first of all, playing at a big club is much harder than playing further down the divisions, and that's why lots of players that get transferred, and for a lot of money, sometimes struggle. I have to disagree. I mean, you know, his touch isn't, you know, I was suddenly just trying to, if we can just move off this, is compare him to other players like a Morata. Morata hasn't got great touch, great skill, great technical ability, I don't think, but he's got great pace and runs very quickly and behind people and heads the ball well. But so does Lukaku. We've seen that in the last couple of weeks. Yeah. But playing for Manchester United attracts great criticism when it's not going well. And what makes it even worse is what Manchester City are doing. And then you're living in a hypersensitive, hypercritical environment in terms of social media and everything else. And it's so easy to buy into the criticism and not look at this fairly. Your stats supported the fair element of it in a way. He's achieved a lot for a young man. But he's not going to get the ball down, turn people, beat 3 players and score a goal, is he? And Manchester United's sort of setup doesn't always help him when they're playing, you know, and he's up front on his own. But you know, I could sit here and make a lot of excuses, but he doesn't excite fans the way that he plays. And being behind City, you just doesn't help. Okay, all right. I'm fascinated to hear that. Let's move on. A few of those points have really, you know, caught my ear there. But the major criticism levelled at him tends to be that he doesn't score important goals, that he doesn't show up in the big games, you know, with the match-winning ones. Hence that Mirror article just now. But there's also, I think, the pressure heaped on him, as you rightly said, by the price tag, and those who insist that, as you would have known perhaps when you went to Liverpool, that things are different now. He's one of the biggest clubs in the world. I mean, former United star and high-profile pundit Gary Neville, for instance, has consistently been saying before big games, right, this is the time Lukaku needs to step up. And then if he doesn't in the game, he criticises him. For instance, after the Manchester derby, when Lukaku, in my opinion, appeared to be isolated by his manager's tactical approach, Gary had this to say. He said, I'm not just talking about struggling in terms of missing a chance. He said Lukaku struggled at being in the game and being confident in the game. Gary went on to say he's got to get over that quickly as he's Manchester United centre forward. He's a young lad, but he needs to get to the point where he believes he should be out there
It's like he doesn't believe in this period. Now, if you ask me, I don't think this is helping Lukaku at all. Similarly, comments from Zlatan Ibrahimovic about the pecking order at the club might not have helped the man who for some reason might be mentally fragile. And while I'm on the theme, I think maybe his manager could help him out a little bit. I mean, Mourinho's got a very odd approach when it comes to Lukaku, who's a player he jettisoned at Chelsea, remember. Mourinho has this habit of defending, appearing to at least, Lukaku, while also appearing to undermine him at the same time. I also remember everyone saying that Lukaku's goal scoring, particularly against the lesser lights, was exactly what United needed to move on from last season. I actually agree with the sentiments in this article from the Manchester Evening News, in which they said, after the game at the weekend, that midfield is the issue. They said, yeah, Lukaku made a slow start in this game, but he overcame it and he scored his goal and carried on his record against lesser clubs. But they said that lack of urgency in midfield was the biggest problem for Manchester United and therefore for Lukaku. Negativity all round, despite the win for United. The Daily Mail demonstrated that. Look at this. They keep going on about this non-celebration, not just from the player, but also from the manager. So, Paul, if I could come back to you on this one, what I'm saying here is, I really respect your judgment when it comes to the player himself, but I just don't think he's being helped by the way maybe they approach certain games or the way they play in general. Do you see anything in that?
Yeah, I mean, he sometimes, likes to play. Listen, the other problem when you play Manchester United, again, a lot of the teams sit deep. Not as many of them like they do for Manchester City, but they will sit deep. Like you said, he alluded to what Gary Neville said in terms of this. He's Manchester United centre forward. He's not Watford centre forward. He's Manchester United. So teams come and play Manchester United and don't always think they can, play an open game. So they sit there. When he played at Everton, he wouldn't have had that, or West Brom, he wouldn't have had that, because teams go there and there's space on the counter attack. But now teams sit up and there's less space to operate in, and that means he's got to maybe be a bit cleverer, or he's got to find a new string to his bow. He's got to improve, John. I'm not saying that, and I don't totally disagree with Gary Neville. Big club managers don't put their arm round your shoulder. By the way, very few of them that I do. But Kenny Dalglish never put his arm around my shoulder.
But Paul, what if he ends up with 25 goals? It's going to be an oddity, isn't it, really, if he ends up with a 25-goal season and yet attracts criticism?
I don't think you can just do it by the numbers. If he scored 4 hat-tricks against lesser sides, then you analyse the score, where the goals came from, in what parts of the game, how important the goals were, and in what games, and that sort of analysis is more important. And so, alluding back to what Neville's saying about turning up, and other people about turning up in the big games, but then a lot of the time, I don't think Mourinho sets up to give, the dilemma for Mourinho against Manchester City was he's at home. How does he set up? He's Manchester United's manager, and yet he looks marginally defensive playing at home against Manchester City, which is a nightmare if you're a Man United fan. That doesn't help Lukaku, does it?
No, it doesn't. Great insight. We're going to have to wrap this one up now because the viewers are going to have their say on what's happening. But I really appreciate your input, and it'd be great to have you come back and talk to us again soon. Paul, thank you very much.
Thanks, John.
Walshy there. I'm going to buy him some high-speed broadband for Christmas. Michelle, just quickly, what's happening in that poll about Lukaku and the criticism?
Majority of people, 47%, think that, some criticism is justified. But what's interesting here is 20% think that the savage criticism is entirely justified.
Wow. What about the Facebook comments then? What are we getting from there?
Let's jump onto Facebook Live. Let's go to this one from Manoj, who says that Lukaku should just focus on his game, score goals and celebrate like a true centre-forward. And then you've got Adnan's comment here. Like other pundits and newspapers say about him, he seems to have disappeared during the big games.
Yeah. Listen, I mean, I think, you're right there, Adnan. The stats do back that up. Flat track bully and all that sort of stuff. Should he say? I think there were reasons for him not celebrating against West Brom, whatever they may have been. But it's really fascinating, this. And people are really polarised here, aren't they? What else have we got, Michelle?
A lot of comments about his price tag. Let's take this one from Muhyiddin. Lukaku's criticism is justified given the amount of money Manchester United have paid for his services. Can't remember Lukaku scoring against any top 16 this season. Such a huge fee is normally meant to deliver on the big stage. Yeah,
good point. And I would say that there are so many elements to this. I think Paul hit a lot of these particular nails on the head. He covered a lot of this ground here. Paul himself, obviously, when he went to Liverpool, he said he struggled. He struggled in that environment there. A lot is expected of him. The price hangs over him, and his club is being dwarfed by Manchester City. It all adds up and hurts him a bit. One more?
Yeah, one more. Let's go to Christian's comment. Scoring goals won't be enough for Lukaku to shut the critics up. He needs to step up his game, and it's as simple as that.
needs to make more clever runs like Morata does. I mean, what happens if he gets 25 goals this season? It is a compelling saga, and I'm fascinated to see how this one pans out. OK, we've focused a lot on one club and one player so far. We'll broaden the net a bit when we come back.
We talk the weekend's big winners and losers in the numbers game after the break. Let us know who you think won big, lost big, and whether you're celebrating or commiserating come the start of the week. Do stick around.
OK, so let's quickly round up the rest of the weekend that's just passed in the Premier League. And as we look at those results, well, let's pick the biggest winners, shall we? I would say, without a doubt, and it's not just in terms of scoreline, Liverpool, City for sure, but also West Ham, Huddersfield and Crystal Palace. Big winners, in my opinion. The biggest losers, undoubtedly, Stoke. And on another individual basis, I would say the best goal, probably that stunning volley by Mesut Ozil for Arsenal. But let's break it all down in a bit more detail right now as I pick my biggest winners of the weekend in terms of 3 games that I think stood out more than most. Let's play the numbers game. Let's start off with that Liverpool win then. They're amazing on the road lately. In fact, record-breakingly so. The first team in top-flight history to win 4 consecutive away games by at least 3 goals. No team also has scored more away league goals than Liverpool this season. They're actually level with City on 24. And the other thing they're doing great is their fast starters. 19 first-half goals scored so far this season. Individually, well, it's Mo Salah once again. He's now reached 20 goals in all competitions, the first Premier League player to do so. And Roberto Firmino is very much back. He's been involved in more Premier League goals now, that's 44, than any Liverpool player since he started there, the start of season 2015-16. All right, OK, let's get straight on to this one here involving Crystal Palace. The superficially entertaining takeaways involve the big numbers. Palace have finally scored an away goal after a 934-minute wait, and Christian Benteke ended a run of 1,106 minutes without a Premier League goal. But those numbers really distract from the truly impressive stats. For instance, Palace have now gone 7 games unbeaten in top-flight football for the first time since 1990, i.e. Premier League era before. Yeah, it did exist. They've kept 3 straight clean sheets away from home for the first time in the Premier League. They also handed Leicester only a second defeat under Claude Puel, who's been so impressive. Let's get on to that West Ham victory against Stoke right now. And David Moyes' fortunes are very much on the upswing. This was the first time that one of his teams had kept 3 straight clean sheets since March 2014, which happened when he was at Manchester United. The Hammers have also taken 7 points from the last 9 after it took them 11 to accumulate 7 prior to that. Stoke City, however, are in free fall. They've now lost 5 of their last 6 league games. They've also kept just 1 clean sheet, 1 in the last 16 league games. I told you a few weeks ago, they're in trouble, and only now do they seem to be acknowledging the fact. Well, on that cheery note, over to you, Michelle.
Well, thank you very much. This talk about Lukaku's got our viewers fired up, John. Let's take this comment from Jude Michael de Cruz. Those who wrote about Lukaku know nothing about football and have never played the game in their lives. Ask them to come and play against me. I'll make sure they know what it feels like to be playing on the pitch than sitting in an armchair at home or their office or wherever. That is fighting talk for you.
That is fighting talk. Cool. Wonder what kind of footballer you are. Good stuff. Keep it coming in, people.
Great. Let's go to another one here from Salim. The difference between Lukaku and other Premier goal poachers is that taking that one chance that would turn the game in United's favour. His finishing all round isn't great.
Okay, yeah, pass.